fantasy note. On Deshaun Watson, in his final 3 seasons with the Texans, Watson averaged 341 points per season in PPR leagues. That was second behind only Patrick Mahomes among quarterbacks. Since he got to the Browns, he's averaged just 86 points per season, which ranks outside the top 40 quarterbacks. Head coach Kevin Stefanski was asked if Watson, who was cleared for contact last week, will play in the team's final preseason game this week.
Yeah, so all of our starters should expect to play, and then we'll determine who does or doesn't, how many plays they do. Like I told you guys, in particular with Deshaun, I want to take in all the information this week and really make a final determination later in the week.
Do you feel the need for him to take a hit before you get to week 1?
I don't. Yeah, I don't. He's played a lot of football. He's been tackled a lot, so but he's confident.
All right, so Stefanski doesn't think he needs to take a hit, but do you think Watson, RC, needs some preseason action before the season starts so soon?
Laura, I don't know what he needs right now, but he needs to play well when this season starts. Deshaun Watson hasn't been his former self or his Houston Texans form when he has been starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And now, so it's trying to figure out who is Deshaun Watson? Can Deshaun Watson ever return to form? Because if he doesn't in this season, when is it going to happen, Laura? And part of wondering whether or not he'll play in this preseason game, whether or not Deshaun Watson will be available, is the fact that he's been unavailable for this team, the team that gave him $230 million guaranteed. So in a normal situation, a quarterback coming off of a shoulder surgery that has been to the heights that Deshaun Watson has been to, I am not concerned. A quarterback that has taken that many hits. But when you look at his activity or lack of activity since 2019, 2020, when you look at the lack of great play from Deshaun Watson and what this team was able to accomplish without him and with Joe Flacco last year, he absolutely needs to play, and he needs to play well because this is a Super Bowl caliber roster, and you thought you traded for a Super Bowl caliber quarterback.
Well, Joe Flacco is gone, and Deshaun Watson, by all accounts, RC, has looked pretty good this summer, but it would be, I think, somewhat disconcerting if he didn't play at all in the preseason and Kevin Stefanski walked it back the way he seems to be doing now, going from saying he was going to play last week in the final preseason game to now not being certain. So I think that has to raise some questions. But the fact of the matter is, this team has so much riding on Deshaun Watson this season. They gave him more guaranteed money than any player ever has gotten in NFL history, and so far there have been a lot of injuries, and the talent's still there, but they need to see the talent, and you'd like to see him in the preseason finale to see that he's going to be ready for opening day against the Dallas Cowboys in Cleveland in Tom Brady's first broadcast. But right now, there are some question marks, despite the fact that, by all accounts, Deshaun has looked pretty good during training camp this summer.
Justin Herbert returned to practice after missing 2 weeks with an injury to his plantar fascia that left him in a boot. You see him out there playing. And head coach Jim Harbaugh described the experience of seeing Herbert back on the field as only Harbaugh could.
Felt like the music should be playing. I thought I heard music. Voices of Angels, maybe. It felt great. It felt great.
How much of just a morale boost or excitement is that for the entire team?
I was excited. I think they would be excited too. I don't know if they heard the Angels sing like I did, but they might have.
It's when he laughs at his own joke for me.
Yeah, I think because he realizes how ridiculous it sounds sometimes, but he means everything from the bottom of his heart.
He was searching for those Angels. All right, what's going on there in L.A.? Justin Herbert in that offense specifically.
I think they're going to take a step back from putting everything on Justin Herbert's shoulders. We've seen with Kellen Moore or the previous regime of offensive coaches, everything expected of Justin Herbert because you had Keenan Allen, because you had Mike Williams, because you had Joshua Palmer. They're going to take a step back and focus on physicality. They're going to focus on the run game. This is Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. If they ain't going to do nothing, they're going to hit you in your mouth. And I think that allows a guy like Justin Herbert to work his way back into playing football, but but also work his way back into understanding and controlling this offense. For Justin Herbert, who is immensely talented, with all the weight on his shoulders of the entire franchise, it'll be good to say, Justin, you don't have to go win it on every single throw. You can work your way into the game, understanding when to step up and make plays, use your legs, get you outside of the pocket, but start with the physical run game with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards first.
I mean, anytime anyone's been able to employ that physical run game, I don't think it's been bad for an offense.
That's not a bad deal.
It can be great for a quarterback. And since Herbert entered the league in 2020, the only quarterbacks who have more fantasy points are Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. But he's got a much different assortment of weapons this year, as RC pointed out. Bill Barnwell ranked the Chargers running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends as the worst skill group in the NFL back in July. So let's live in a fantasy world here as Field Yates and Damien Woody jump back in here. D-Wood, how do you assess Herbert's fantasy value in this Harbaugh system?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Laura, we're still in a passing league, so I think the volume is going to be there. But RC was right in when he talked about the mentality of the Los Angeles Chargers. This is going to be a punch him in the mouth, run type of football team first. The reason that Jim Harbaugh is there is because too many times we saw with Justin Herbert, he was getting hit. The run game wasn't there. That's why he's there. That's why Greg Roman is there to kind of implement their will. And you're going to see that. You actually could see that by the moves that they made in the offseason, whether it was drafting a lineman like Joe Alden with the 5th pick. You know, some of the tight ends that they brought in who are, you know, predominantly blocking tight ends. They want to impose their will on people. But he's still going to, and I'm talking about Justin Herbert, he's still going to pass the ball around a lot on the field.
Yeah, Laura, it is certainly a passing league. So there's going to be some volume there for Justin Herbert. But take a look at all of the signs that matter in the world of fantasy football here. This is a run-heavier offense. This is a team that this offseason traded away Keenan Allen to the Bears, cut Mike Williams, and then had this opportunity with the 5th overall pick in the draft to take a player in Malik Nabers, who I and many other in the draft community felt like was right there neck and neck with Marvin Harrison Jr., and they instead took an offensive tackle who could be an excellent player, by the way, in Joe Alt. Justin Herbert in this offense certainly wants to be an offense that grounds and pounds. You look at this surrounding crew right now, by the way, and there's not a single player on the Los Angeles Chargers roster that, as of right now, I view as a week 1 starting player at his position. I have Justin Herbert outside my top 12 at quarterbacks. You saw the consensus rank of quarterback 18, Laura. There are simply way too many higher upside options, including, by the way, the first 2 players in this year's draft, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels.
Wow, yeah, so not a starter in the fantasy world. Also, Ladd McConkey, you saw him at the top of the list there. He was the only one that was actually getting a high ranking. All right, what do you think when you hear that about this Chargers weaponry?
First off, and I know people get mad when I do stuff like this sometimes, I met Ladd McConkey this offseason, and I walked up to him and I told him that I worked extremely hard during the draft process to give him a black man comp. I said, I refuse to compare you to Wes Walker. I refuse to compare you to Danny Amendola because you are not like any of those players. And I was like, you remind me of a former teammate, Emmanuel Sanders. And he goes, I like that one. When you think about what this team is now, you're asking Quentin Johnson to be a better player than he was last year. Eliminate the drops, become an impact guy with 50-50 catches. I believe he can do that, but he has to get out of his own head. So if you're going to be dependent on a guy like Ladd McConkey, the run game has to be strong. Also, opportunities to use Joshua Palmer in a way that you hadn't in years past, because I believe when he's gotten opportunities to make plays, he's come through for the Los Angeles Chargers.
I like what you did for Ladd. That was nice of you.
I think it's what we have to do. Like, we have to stop being separate and be together.
Look at Joe Burrow and some major questions around both quarterbacks as Joe Burrow and Anthony Richardson, who you see on your screen now, both returning from season-ending injuries. Let's start in Indianapolis, Adam. Richardson only played 4 games last year before the season-ending surgery. What do we know about his health now?
Well, we're talking about the health of Anthony Richardson, Laura, and right now his health is fine. They feel very good about him going into the season. He's been a regular participant in training camp. When they open the season on opening day, he's going to be out there playing quarterback. Now, he absorbed so many hits last year, you wonder and hope that he can be out there for all 17 games of the regular season. But after undergoing the shoulder surgery that he had last year, they've already had him out there in the preseason. That's how good and comfortable the Colts feel about Anthony Richardson right now.
Yeah, Field, when you see him play, you would see why he would potentially be an exciting fantasy option. You know, some of the health and maybe how they'll manage him could factor in. Should fantasy players consider him their starter as an option for this fall.
Laura, go big or go home. I'm all in on Anthony Richardson this season, who last year had just 2 games in which he started and finished the season. You might look at that as a concern. I'm looking at it as what were the results. Quarterback 2 and quarterback 4 for the week. Anthony Richardson last year was not a great passing quarterback, and yet in 12 quarters of play, he had 4 rushing touchdowns. In fantasy football, I don't care whether you're a great passing quarterback or not. If you're an elite running quarterback, that is a cheat code in fantasy football. If you go back to last season, the top 4 rushing quarterbacks, all 3 of them were amongst the top 3 scoring quarterbacks in all of fantasy football. Meanwhile, these elite passing quarterbacks who don't run that much, guys like Brock Purdy, maybe even C.J. Stroud, those guys were all outside the top 6 for fantasy scores. Tua Tagovailoa led the NFL in passing yards. He was quarterback 21 on a points per game basis in fantasy football in a league that is just filled with quarterbacks who are more athletic than we have seen in quite some time. I'm not sure any of them stacks up to Anthony Richardson.
That's the other piece of it, too, when it comes to the reality of what we see on Sundays or in primetime football. It's guys who can create with their legs, give you that added dimension that allows the rest of your game to catch up to you. When you think about Anthony Richardson, there was so much coming into the draft. He has to develop as a passer with his accuracy. He has to understand defenses better. Well, what he can do is outrun linebackers. He can outrun defensive ends. Now it's going to be about, can he protect himself while he does that? I'm so excited to see what Shane Steichen does in the second year with Anthony Richardson. We didn't get to see these guys for an extended period of time, but we're talking about a coach that tutored Justin Herbert, a coach that tutored Jalen Hurts in his MVP caliber season, and now you have Anthony Richardson that from a pure measurable standpoint could be more talented than both of those quarterbacks.
Yeah, you're not lying. I mean, the one interesting thing about him, you mentioned, can he protect himself? It's worth remembering that he hasn't played all that much. He didn't play a whole lot even in college, and then, of course, was given this opportunity with the Colts. They were investing in the talent that they see in him going forward, but he's still relatively inexperienced when it comes to managing, taking some of those risks and running the ball, and then also making sure that he stays healthy. As for their joint practice partners, all eyes in Cincinnati are squarely on Jamar Chase and that situation. Adam, what do we know there?
Well, there's a lot we don't know there, Laura. What we do know right now is that Jamar Chase has yet to practice this summer, has not been a part of training camp, didn't show up for the mandatory minicamp. We also know that unlike Brandon Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb, each of whom has 1 year left on his deal, Jamar Chase has 2 years left on his deal. And while the Cowboys have actively worked to re-sign CeeDee Lamb and the 49ers have actively worked to re-sign Brandon Ayuk, we heard the Bengals president Mike Brown say on the eve of training camp that he'd prefer to wait to get a deal done with Jamar Chase. There's enough elements here, I think, that create some mystery to this particular situation. And again, there are some people that thought that we are reaching a critical juncture, that maybe the two sides could figure out an agreement at some point this week. But there also is the concern that if a deal is not done, that Jamar Chase might not be willing to step on the football field. The thing is, Chase has been very quiet about all this. The Bengals have downplayed everything. So nobody really knows the full truth, but I think there's enough there for this situation to be worrisome for the Bengals and their fans.
I'm going to tell you what ain't no mystery. If Jamar Chase ain't playing, Joe Burrow ain't as good. And so if you want to get a fantasy quarterback, you don't want that one if Jamar Chase is not on the field. Even when Joe Burrow was a little hampered last year with his calf, when he targeted Jamar Chase, he played better football. And we started to see that connection pay dividends right before they lost Joe Burrow for the year with the wrist injury. There's so much chemistry here, so much connection between the two players. They are dependent on one another to be as good as they could possibly be, because every time they've been as good as they could possibly be since they were 18 years old, they were together. And so if I'm Joe Burrow, I'm going up to Mike Brown and I'm saying, Mike, you're going to pay Joe Burrow. You're going to pay Jamar Chase anyway. So why are we waiting? Why are we hassling over some millions of dollars and 2 years left on the contract? We want him to be a Cincinnati Bengal for life. Let's make sure he's a happy Cincinnati Bengal in 2024, because without him, there is no chance for the Cincinnati Bengals or Joe Burrow to be what they could fully be by themselves.
Burrow may just want to clip that off and
he can take it.
Yeah, I think, okay, good. We got that endorsed. To that point, Field, given all the questions at wideout, right, plus the injury that he's coming off of himself, how do you assess Burrow's fantasy value?
I'm a little more nervous than I was about 90 seconds ago, Laura. That being said, the good news on Joe Burrow is this. You are getting elite upside for moderate price point. If you go look at average draft position, which is where these guys are being taken on average on ESPN.com, you are seeing that Joe Burrow is squarely in that second tier of quarterbacks, way behind guys like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, who, by the way, deserve to be going as high as they are going. But Joe Burrow going low enough right now. You're getting a player who, going back to 2022, because last year was kind of a lost season in several ways for that Cincinnati offense. Joe Burrow was a top 10 quarterback in 10 of his first 13 games. That also included the stretch in which he threw for 781 yards in back-to-back games and was the best quarterback in fantasy in each of those weeks. There is so much upside with Joe Burrow. Now, I would certainly love Ja'Marr Chase to be on the field. Perhaps LSU guy Ryan Clark can get through to Ja'Marr, and we can get through to the Bengals. Not too much pressure, RC, but I'm asking for a friend.
Hey, RC ain't pocket watching, and I ain't pushing nobody to pay nobody no money that they don't want to.